got to pull up your dissertation before we get started here.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Planted podcast where discipleship takes root. We're excited to be here with you. Thankful that you're listening. I'm Pastor Darren Thurber from the Calamasa Church, and I am joined by amazing friends and senior pastors from around the Inland Empire today. Iki Taimi from La Sierra University Church, and Vitug from Loma Linda Filipino Church, Pastor Teravin Cross from Azure Hills, and Pastor Randy Roberts from Loma Linda University Church. Some interesting research that Barna has done. And the title of the article is actually 5 Trends Defining Americans' Relationship to Church. We are only going to talk about 3 of them because we are a group of long-winded pastors. So we're going to get right into it. The first trend that they have here is that nearly 2 in 5 churchgoers report regularly attending multiple churches. So we've been talking about rootedness for several weeks on the pod, and here we see that it's pretty common for 2 in 5 churchgoers to regularly attend multiple churches. Another interesting fact they brought out is that church hoppers are just as likely as more loyal attenders to report weekly attendance. In other words, just because they select from a handful of different churches to attend doesn't make them any less likely to actually attend a church on any given weekend. Also, those who hop around don't always do it as part of a routine, but kind of once in a while. So, Iki, let me start with you. Are there any things in that trend that encourages you or concerns you? And then maybe also a follow-up question that all of us could be thinking about too, is how should we understand or approach this concept of church attendance, especially when we're wanting to talk about being rooted in a community?
The challenge here is this is the reality that we live in. We live in a very restless world that is constantly on the move. And in our society, individualism is very strong, and the need to be pragmatically getting things done rules our life. When you ask people, hey, how are you? They'll usually tell you what they're doing. They don't really tell you how they're doing, right? Because we're constantly trying to get things done. So what happens is sometimes I think we sacrifice rootedness for restlessness, because that's the kind of world that we're living in. And I think it's super important that if we want formation, we have to be present for that. One cannot have formation without being present to the thing they are being formed into. And so while we are constantly moving around here and there, I think there's a real sense of desire from pastors and spiritual formational leaders that people slow down enough to move at the pace of God, to be present in one community, to see the formation that happens in our character and our personality and in our lives when we are in one place and we're accountable to each other and we see each other and we're present with each other and we see how God is being revealed in the relationships there. That doesn't happen overnight. This kind of formation is like slow cooking, but we live in a microwave world. So we'd like to get things done immediately. God, change my character right now, this moment. And God says, well, I got to put you through some things. You're like, nah, I don't want that part. I just want to be made in your image. That takes time. And being such a restless group of human beings, we don't settle down into a place. So church kind of becomes just a bunch of individuals who move into a space and move out into other spaces. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer would say that the Christian community isn't an aggregation of individuals. It's the place where faith is deeply discerned through time of presence that happens in that communal space. And I think that this is the reality we deal with, and yet we could also probably find something more beautiful and deeper if we're willing to slow down and be in community together. That's just my take on it.
Love that.
That's beautiful, Icky. It's funny because
I would like to make a motion, Manny, that we all just sit here and listen to Icky for the rest of the
Yes.
time.
Oh, man.
That would be the best.
Oh,
Motion.
we're
Oh,
gonna eat
man.
that, and we're gonna be bankrupt real soon.
Oh, I like the eating a lot. But I was going to say, I have 2 premarital counseling after this podcast. And so my mind is like, it brings back to, I remember my dating years, they were fun, but my marriage years, as difficult as there have been, I love even more.
Mm.
And I think the difference between the dating is that if things go well, it's great. But if things don't go well, it's easy to move on, right? It's let me go to the next person in there. But in a marriage thing, man, that commitment that happens day in and day out is just amazing. Knowing that someone is there for you, rooting for you, growing with you, struggling with you, I think that's amazing. And I think that's one of the cool things about being in a place where you are committed and you get to know the good, the not so good, right? And the places where we can encourage others and others can encourage us because we get into the messiness of life. But in a marriage relationship, um, there's messiness in marriage, but there's also the beauty of marriage, the beauty of being there and committed to that relationship, to let it grow in for better or for worse, right? Till death do us part. So that's kind of how I see a little bit of that, and that's kind of where I'm at now because I've been doing so much. I'm preparing for 2 more weddings, and that's where my mind is.
What encourages me about this trend is that it shows that we're seeking, that there's a longing that's not being filled, that we're still longing for, searching for. And that's encouraging and hopeful because oftentimes, whether we're seeking a program or a sermon, or if we could understand this more right now, or what's happening on the landscape of our country and how does this connect in with Bible prophecy, whatever it is that drives us to whatever program or place that we're hopping to, I think it's good to be aware that we're seeking something. It means that we're looking for something. So to me, that's a positive in this trend. The downside, the challenge is that we don't often seek what it is will truly fulfill what we're longing for, because it takes so much more patience. This is what God has circled back with me so many times when I retell this story of going to China with my dad and with my husband and my brother, that there's a type of bamboo that was planted, and for 4 years you don't see anything that's happening. There's not a sprout that comes on the surface, but then in the 5th year it can grow up to 37 to 39 feet in 1 year. There's this process of something going below the surface that I can't control or name. I think that's what happens in community. What we get when we're in community, when we're in the unglamorous parts, the stuff that you don't see when you're showing up for a camp meeting or for a special program. So to me, it's really important to ask myself, what is it that I'm willing to wait for? What discomfort am I willing to endure in order to see the growth that I'm not controlling, that I don't have any say over, but that God is working in the darkness of the soil, because there's something God's doing. God is growing me, God is growing us, and oftentimes that means it's boring, or we get impatient or restless, or there's a process, though, that I think if we're willing to show up to the same spaces with the same people, it can be very similar to that kind of growth that happens year in and year out.
I guess one of the things that I wonder about when I hear that, or when I see that here in our community, is what is it that drives people to different churches, to different locations? What is it that keeps a commitment from being engaged in one community, in one context? I can imagine there might be various reasons. One of the ones I wonder about is, could it be that people are interested in getting something but not getting stuck, not getting drawn in, not feeling like, okay, I got to start coming back here now. I want to keep my options open. I have FOMO. I don't know what else there is out there. And I think in most areas of our lives, I'm sure we could think of some exceptions to this, but in most areas of our lives, if we're in that space, it's hard to say we're anything other than consumers. So I think that to really deepen and grow, Manny was talking earlier about marriage. To really deepen and grow in a marriage means you do take what comes. Like Manny said, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly of life. That's just life. You can't duck out into a new relationship just because it's more exciting, or just because this one got boring, or just because this week's showing wasn't that great, and expect that relationship to deepen and thrive. So I'm sure there are some reasons why that can legitimately happen, and every one of us for certain specific reasons. In our community, for example, having kids in an academy orchestra, you're going to be in that space as they're moving around. You're going with your kids. I understand all of that. I guess I'm just wondering at a deeper level, what is it that keeps us a step or two away from really committing and saying, I'm here for the good, the bad, the ugly, the up, the down. This is just my community. This is my church. I'm going to do life with and grow with these people through beautiful times and through times of conflict and difficulty. It's a call that's not easy to answer in our day and time.
What's interesting about that is when we think about where we are at in the history of the world, because we like it when things are smooth and direct and easy. So the ugly parts and the parts that creates friction, we try to minimize or mitigate that as much as possible. But in the world of AI, where nothing is as smooth and as good as AI, we begin to see that some of the most beautiful parts about our humanity is the unique parts, the parts that creates us as human beings. I mean, you're not going to be able to use better words to articulate anything than AI could. That's just not possible. And yet, that's not what we were created to do, right? We were created to be human beings together in a space where God does this beautiful thing and creates a mosaic out of our broken pieces. And the more we try to get rid of that and try to only have high points and beautiful moments and performative experiences, the less human our actual experiences become.
I appreciate that you brought that up, Icky. My husband and I have been having a lot of conversations about this too, because there's been some hopelessness around, if AI can do this better, then what am I here for?
Yeah.
Around a lot of different job scenarios, and especially those emerging from universities with degrees right now. But I think it can cause us to lean in to say, well, then what does it mean to be human? What is like the very most important part about being together as a community? What does it mean to show up? And hopefully lean into those commitments to be real with one another. I think that's very significant.
Another level of commitment that we often view at the church, beyond just attendance and being present, which is, of course, important, is membership. And so the article talks a little bit about church membership. It says it's still a common practice and is correlated with positive outcomes, but its importance is declining among younger churchgoers. It's cited how people who are members of a church, they're more likely to say that they connect with God or personally experience his presence during worship service, which is a wonderful thing to hear. But then it also says younger generations of churchgoers are less likely to even say that membership is applicable to them. So I think this is a fascinating topic. What are your thoughts? I'm going to start with you, Manny. Your thoughts on church membership? I don't want to get anybody in trouble, like we're being rebellious against the church manual here or anything, but I just think it's a fascinating. I've always had a little bit of a issue with membership. It's always been a little tough sometimes. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. But what are some of the things you think are valuable or beneficial or drawbacks to membership? And then if the younger generations are pushing away from it, does that mean that we should have some sort of change to how we do membership in the future?
If I could change that word membership, I think what I would change it into our church is use the word partnership.
It's a good word.
Membership versus partnership. You
I
see,
like that.
in membership, we become a part of something, but in partnership, we do life together. And I think that's one of the things that you can't avoid when you're a partner. And again, it goes back to that dating or marriage, right? When you get into that partnership mode, you get out as much as you put in. I love investing. And last time we talked about a little bit of investing. But in investing, it's you just don't decide to invest in a certain stock. You do your homework, you look at it, you put your time and money and effort, and you really put whatever time that you put in is what you're going to get out. And so for me, I think that that's that's what makes membership or partnership really important in our Christian walk, is that we get out what we put in.
In my listening with younger generations, especially as I've been doing baptism Bible studies or an invitation to join, because we're baptized into Jesus Christ and the forgiveness of sins, and we connect that oftentimes
Right.
at the same time we vote people into membership. And the part that's felt really hurtful, or I think the reason that has been expressed to me over the years, especially in these recent years, that membership has become less attractive, is because we've used we've used it to draw out people from the circle, to say you are able to belong and you are not able to belong. So we could name all of the reasons, but I think part of the problem with, or is this commitment that Randy mentioned earlier. A fear of commitment, a settling in, is a part of why people resist membership. But another piece that's been significant is, if you're going to use this to circle people out, then I don't want anything to do with it. I'll be baptized into Christ, but then I don't want something that I have access to be something that is denied someone else. So that's another piece that I've heard in conversation that I think we really have to pay attention to. How inclusive is the gospel message, really? Who is invited to belong?
If I could use a word, I would use the word, instead of membership, covenant. Because
Nice.
this is like you and I doing this thing together, right? And which means I'm not in this for rights. Membership has rights. And my right is I get to be a part of this group and you don't get to be a part of this group because you happen to not do it exactly the way I do it. But covenant is more like I'm responsible for you as you're responsible for me, and we're going to do this thing together. And it's a beautiful journey that we're going to do. So I feel like that's probably the word I would use, because in Adventism we're an interesting breed of Christianity. Our membership is our eternal ticket into heaven. Man, we did not remove nobody from membership. Why? Because if you do, they're lost. Like, there is this huge, like, we're doing way too much here. I think membership isn't. let's not do that as an eternal issue. Let's do this as I want a covenant to walk life with you. And let's do this. Let's do it together.
I think that if membership is applied to our discipleship journey, there's an inherent risk, even maybe danger would be a better word in it. And that is in understanding membership as the goal. Membership is far from the goal. And we've often seen the bar of learning about Jesus, coming to him, being baptized, becoming a member. And now you just participate. You're part of the church. A lot of times nothing substantive or serious happens after that. Where membership is, I think, a reasonable way to say we're a part of this body, we've made a commitment to it. But if it becomes the end all be all, we're in deep trouble. Because I don't see any place in Scripture where we're called to get our names on the books of a certain church. I see a lot there about growing in discipleship with Jesus throughout the span of our lives. As long as we're alive, we continue to walk with him and grow. And baptism is merely the mark of a beginning disciple. So I think if membership has too often been understood as the goal, and that's to sorely misuse it.
Randy, it's almost kind of like we spend millions of dollars trying to get a person baptized, but why don't we spend just as much in nurturing them along the way so that they don't go out the back door? I think, because I think of all the evangelisms that happen in the Philippines, right? I came from a small town. It's not small, but in Olongapo, where one time I remember they had an evangelism series where they had 300 people baptized, and the membership of the church is only 300, so they doubled in size. But 3 years later, the membership of that church was still about 300. And I'm thinking, like, was the goal simply to baptize people, or was the goal to really truly make them disciples? And so I love what you have to say about that. Membership is not the goal. Baptism is not the goal. Discipleship is.
There's a few times in baptism Bible studies I say, if you forget everything else that I say, just remember this. About 3 times that I say that. One of them is this: the baptism is not a graduation. It's a lifelong journey with Christ. So if you remember nothing else, remember that it's a lifelong journey. You will always be growing. And so this idea of I'm in this to grow for my life, which is a very different thing, go ye therefore and make members of all nations, doesn't quite have the same ring of go ye therefore and make disciples, that we're involved in it, we're in it. But it's easier, it's more cut and dry to just say, well, you're a member now, so it's done. But we have to journey together for much longer if we're about discipleship.
Love it.
When I was a young pastor in another conference in the Adventist church, I won't mention the conference. It's a really big state in the Southwest. But anyway, I was a pastor in this conference. There was a lot of pressure to get people baptized. We're at a pastor's meeting. They were saying, if you were going to set a goal of 100, come up front. So a bunch of pastors went up. 75, come up. 74 went up. 50, 25. I'm sweating bullets by now, thinking, man, what am I supposed to do? If I baptized 25 people, I'd about double the membership of my church. But I'm sitting next to this older pastor who he's not moving either. And I thought, okay, well, he's been around the block a few times. So as long as he's not moving, I think I'm probably safe. But we're down to about 10, and I'm kind of looking side eye, and he's not moving. I finally said, are you going to set a goal? And he said, I am. And I said, well, what's your goal going to be? He said, 1. I said, 1? You're setting a goal of 1? He said, yeah, that's what I'm doing. He said, and I'm going to go back to my church and invite 99 other people to set the same goal. I thought, okay. And then he said, because I learned a long time ago that shepherds don't make sheep, sheep make sheep.
That's right.
And anyway, it was Maury Venden. Some of you might know his name. So I've never forgotten that. And I've thought that is the best way to do it. Because when sheep make sheep, they become
Yes.
part of the flock and they're taken in and they're loved. And,
Yes.
I love that concept.
Great stuff. Well, maybe we can touch just briefly on one more, even though the discussion on membership has been really rich. The last trend they talked about was the perception of the church's relevance to the community. It says the church's relevance to the community is under question, especially among non-Christians. So people who were active church attenders reported very positive views that the church had a positive impact on their community. But non-Christians had a very low marks for the church having a positive impact on the community. And, we have been talking a lot about being rooted, being planted. And I think it's important to say that as much as we want people to get connected to the church needs to really be connected to its community and to be planted and rooted in its community and make a difference there. And so maybe I'll just start with you, Tara, and you could answer one or both of these, but what are some of the meaningful ways your church is engaging with the community that it's in? And then maybe what are some improvements the church needs to make in this area, since the perception of people outside the church is that we aren't really doing a lot to engage our community?
It's a really important question. Thank you, Darren. One of my favorite times here at Azure Hills is when we have Light Up Grand Terrace, where the whole parking lot is filled with around 1,000 people from our neighborhood. And the mayor's here, the city council, and then our whole community comes out. And what I get again and again, the question from people is, why do you care about us? Why do you care about what's happening in this community? Or, statements like, thank you for caring. Those relationships really matter. And when we're rooted in one place, when we're in one place, what I've noticed is that those who come back from our members year after year to connect with the community during that time, they start to build relationships and rapport, just like I do with our neighbors. And there's this depth of community that happens that's beyond just coming to church in a place, but actually getting to know people. The question really is always like, do you care, and why do you care? So there's been tremendous opportunities to pray, to be there, to like these conversations and stories of sharing life and doing life with the broader community that have been the most significant and meaningful to me. That start there, but also go into other different times in our community. But that's one of them that has been really significant.
When I listened to your question, the question that popped in my mind, one that we always kind of say is, if your church disappeared tomorrow, would your community miss it? Right? And that's a really sombering question. We joke here because at Loma Linda Filipino Church, we're known for our oranges. We have people from all over the place, as far as, I've had people drive all the way from Palm Springs, we're in Loma Linda, to go to Loma Linda just to buy our oranges. And one time I asked this person, so what are you doing with 2 or 3 bags of oranges? And you know what they said? They were going to ship them to Florida. I'm going, wait, what? They had tons of oranges in Florida. And you know what they said, like, but yours is just sweeter than any oranges we've had. Now, if you're wondering where you could get those oranges, it's at 11180 New Jersey Street.
This afternoon.
And I don't know if they're just blessed oranges, but they are shipped all over. But I laugh at that. But the area that we really struggle with, I'm going to just tell you, this is just a vulnerable moment here. We worked with unhoused population. That was the real struggle. we finally we had baptized 2 or 3 of them. They were a part of our place. We actually had them working. We actually did that, and we actually had to close it down because we are afraid of liability and the messiness sometimes of really getting into the lives of the community. And I'm going to say that it's one that as a church I need to really study more. And as an Adventist church, to say, where does liability end, where ministry begins, or vice versa? And I'm going to tell you that even sometimes your community, it does not like the fact that there are people coming from the community that maybe look different, dress different, act different. But when I finally had to say, I'm sorry, but you could no longer, I had 3 of them text me back and say, Pastor Manny, just know that even though you had to close what you were doing, you have made an eternal difference in our lives. And I'm going to say that if you really, sometimes we're so fond of community being, we're going to go out there and then we're going to come home and be safe in our home. But what really happens if we allow the community, if we just don't go out to the community, but really allow the community to get to where we are and get into the messiness and ministry of community? It's tough. I wish I had the answer, man. I'm still struggling with it today as a pastor.
Thank you for wrestling with it, Manny.
Yeah, it's messy.
It is.
Being involved in the community is messy, and I don't have an answer, and I hope maybe you guys do, but it's one that I'm really struggling with right now, still today.
If our church disappeared, would our community care? Is probably answered by answering a previous question, and that is, if our community disappeared, would our church care? Because I'm not sure we have a whole lot of care about the people right around us. We care about those who come to us, that often drive to get to us, and don't live in the communities right around our churches. I guess if we answered that question by yes, we would care, and we're showing that we would care by what we're doing in the community, then the second question would probably answer itself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well said.
Wow, that was powerful. Yeah, I'm right on that, Randy. I think you hit something on the nail there. We as Adventists are very insular, and so we drive past many churches and communities to be at another Adventist church. And if we happen to not have a preference of a church, we drive past other Adventist churches to go to another Adventist church. What would it look like if we just committed down, like, I'm going to go to this Adventist church in my neighborhood to make a difference today? Like, how could that affect the world? And I think that when the world looks at the Adventist church, they look at programs like ADRA, or they say it's a hospital, right? Like, we appreciate their health care. And then when they look into like the more detailed, like the tighter spaces, local spaces, the things they'll say is like, oh, you're the people who are vegans and who don't like flavor and who don't eat, that's what they say about us, right? In the local space. But how much bigger of a difference could we make if we created the space here? And this is the work of the church that's needed to be done by the church through people who live in its local vicinity that know and care about the community that's local. And listen, I mean, there are lots of reasons why people move from one church to a distant one. There's no judgment on that, but I just wonder, like, what it might look like if we focused in on our local spaces and all just like poured in there. One of my pastor friends, he said to me, you know what they should do? They should let you go to whatever church you want, but your tithe goes to the closest church.
That's a good idea.
Wow.
What you said, Nicky, reminds me of a story I read about a guy who went to the church to pick up their guest preacher for the weekend. He saw a guy get off the plane, looked a little bit older, really skinny, and not too healthy. Went up and said, "Are you the pastor?" And the guy said, "No, it's my ulcer that makes me look like this." And I thought, too many times that can be the kind of aura we communicate, where I think if we are robust and alive, if we're involved in our community, we care about our community, I think the community is a whole lot more likely to care about us then.
Truth.
Yes.
Well, thank you, friends. We are out of time. It always seems to go by too fast. Thanks for listening. Next episode, we're going to have a discussion on daily spiritual habits. So please make sure to tune in for that. And yes, please join us in your local church on September 27th for our Discipleship Sabbath.